So let us start with the very common syndrome, which is bacterial vaginosis. It is a clinical syndrome of unknown etiology where you have overgrowth of certain polymicrobial flora and the common lactobacillus species, which is there in which is part of the normal vaginal flora, is severely depleted. So if you see the normal vaginal flora, there are hydrogen peroxide producing lactobacillus crispatus along with the other lactobacilli, which maintain the aerobic acidic milieu in the healthy vagina. And these bacilli, the lactobacilli, are severely depleted in bacterial vaginosis. As a result, the other bacteria which are in a very minuscule quantity or are acquired through sexual transmission predominates. So the altered flora of vagina will have Gardnerella vaginalis as a main pathogen along with the Mobiluncus species and certain anaerobes in terms of Bacteroides and Peptostreptococcus. Now, there are novel bacterial vaginosis associated bacteria, which are type 1, 2, and 3. They are acronymed as bacterial vaginosis associated bacteria, so BVAB 1, 2, and 3. These are being identified by 16S ribosomal analysis, but yet to be cultured. So these are the three other bacteria which are responsible or which are associated with the bacterial vaginosis. So bacterial vaginosis is associated with the sexual intercourse and with the same epidemiological markers as seen with the classical STD, which mainly includes the multiple sex partners, new partners, and past history of sexually transmitted diseases. Although there is no specific STI or sexually transmitted pathogen or the organism which is directly linked to bacterial vaginosis, that if this particular bug is there as a part of STI, then bacterial vaginosis will be more or less. So there is no direct linkage between the two, but it has been seen that the patients who have the same risk factors as that of STI are having bacterial vaginosis more often. Okay, so but bacterial vaginosis per se to be said as sexually transmitted disease, it is still controversial, because if you have a single sexual partner, female, then still the female can develop bacterial. So the main symptoms of bacterial vaginosis includes the foul smelling discharge. This foul smelling discharge is mainly due to the release of amines produced by the anaerobic bacteria, which we have just discussed, the bacteria which will predominate, which are going to decarboxylase amino acids like lysine and arginine and produce this foul smelling products. So typically the discharge has a fishy vaginal odor, and there is a gray homogeneous thin vaginal secretions at the vaginal opening, which are usually seen. So this is the picture just to give you a glimpse that bacterial vaginosis can have white homogeneous discharge smoothly coating the vaginal mucosa, right? Again, there is a problem. So how to proceed with the diagnosis of bacterial vaginosis? First is a clinical sample collection. So collection of specimen is to be done by the gloved hands and vaginal speculum in place, so that you can collect the discharge. Generally, when you apply the vaginal speculum, the discharge which is there will definitely is going to come in the scapulum groove itself. And then you can also collect the specimen from the lateral or the posterior fornix of vagina with a sterile cotton swab pre-soaked in normal saline. So what you are going to do with that? So the sample which is there is that swab is transported to the lab in a sterile container, and then you can do the lab processing. There are certain tests which can be done at the bedside or the patient side as well. So one is the vaginal pH test. So it is point of care test because it can be done at the patient bedside. So you have taken the swab with the secretions, and or you can directly touch the pH paper to the wall of the vagina directly. The normal pH, which is acidic, that is 3.6 to 4.2, is found to be raised because of the presence of the amines which we have just discussed, right? So ammonia and amines, they are going to raise the pH. So pH will be more than 4.5. However, the limitation of this particular test is that the test you cannot do or is going to give you false negative reading in presence of menstrual blood or presence of cervical mucus or semen or concomitant infection with Trichomonas vaginalis, which we are going to discuss in later part of our today's lecture. Second test is the amine test or whiff test as it is known as. So this can also be done at the bedside or can be done in lab as well. So you take a drop of vaginal fluid on a slide, put KOH 10% on the fluid, and you will feel that there will be kind of fishy odor suddenly increasing from that particular secretions or the solution which has been there on the slide, because again of the production of amines, and amines are volatile and they are going to produce the fishy odor. As you see that the person has to smell it, right? So the test become very, very subjective, and it is absent in almost 50% of the women with bacterial vaginosis. So it is not very, very reliable test. So these two tests can be done on the bedside or can be sent to lab, and lab can do it. So the swab which has been sent to the lab, that can be used for wet mount preparation. So you take a normal saline on a slide, rub the swab over it, which is having the vaginal fluid, put a cover slip and observe it under the microscope. So what you can see is the cells, specific cells, which are known as clue cells. So you have the, what are clue cells? Clue cells are the squamous epithelial cells with many, many cocobacillary organisms attached to its surface, giving it a granular appearance. So the margin become hazy of that particular squamous cell, right? The cells do not have well-defined edge because of the presence of bacteria and the disintegration of the cell, right? So this is the normal vaginal smear which you see. So if you do the gram staining, you will see the epithelial cells in pinkish color, well-defined border with nuclei, along with long bacilli, which are nothing but the normal commensal of vagina, that is the lactobacilli. However, in bacterial vaginosis, what you see is this is the left picture, which is from the wet mount. You see there is a arrow. This arrow is basically denoting the cell which is the clue cell. This is a clue cell where you see the margin are being heavily blunted because of the adhesion of the bacteria, right? So this bacteria which is adhering to it is largely nothing but the Cardinella vaginalis. The other cells, this is the other cell which is there. Here there is a well-defined margin. So this is a normal epithelial cell, and this one is the clue cell. On the right hand side, it is the same patient where you are able to see the clue cell. Large number of bacteria are adherent to the epithelial cell, and the margins are hardly visible. So this is a gram stain smear of the vaginal secretion. So flu cell presence is pathognomic of bacterial vaginosis. So it gives an indication that probably the patient is having bacterial vaginosis. Then we have a clinical criteria to diagnose the bacterial vaginosis, because we see that pH is alkaline or is shifting towards alkalinity, but there are many factors which can affect the pH. Fishy odor, just seen in 50% of cases, and clue cells. So clue cells, which we have discussed in a wet mount or the gram stain, which you see around, they are there, and they can be again present in the disease called trichomoniasis, right? So these four things can be there. Out of this, any three combination, if present, is indicative of or confirm the diagnosis of bacterial vaginosis. Okay, so next thing is what else we can see on gram stain. So when you do the gram stain, there are three different morphotypes of bacteria which are seen around. One is Lactobacillus morphotype. Lactobacilli are gram-positive rods, so you will be able to see large number of gram-positive rods. Then Gardnerella or Bacteroides or the anaerobic morphotypes. These are gram-variable or gram-negative rods. And then Mobiluncus morphotype, which is curved gram-negative rods. So combination of these three kind of bacteria will be seen, right? So Lactobacillus morphotype, if predominates over any other morphotype, that means probably it is not bacterial vaginosis. The rest of the two morphotypes presence is indicative of bacterial vaginosis. So there is a relative count which has to be done for three different morphotypes, and that count or scoring system is there, that is known as Nugent scoring. So there we have a weighted combination of Lactobacilli, Gardnerella vaginalis, and Bacteroides and Mobiluncus. Each morphotype is quantitated from 1 plus to 4 plus with regard to the number of morphotypes under oil immersion field, because bacteria are going to be seen under oil immersion field only. And the sum of the weighted quantitation of the three morphotypes can yield a score from 0 to 10, which is going to tell you which particular whether the patient is suffering from bacterial vaginosis or not. Again, it is stuck up. So this is a table which is generally used for scoring. So for Lactobacillus, if there are 30 or more bacilli which are there, the score is 0 because it is more towards normal. And as the Lactobacillus decreases, the score increases, right? Whereas on the other two bacteria or morphotypes, as the count increases, the score is going to increase. So major count is given to the Gardnerella Bacteroides group, and curved gram-negative bacilli, the Mobiluncus morphotype, is having the maximum score of 2. So based on the scoring, so you have the gram stain, you look for these morphotypes, count the bacteria, give the score, and then you total it. So if the total score is 0 to 3, it is negative. Between 4 to 6, it means indeterminate. You are not very sure that the patient is having bacterial vaginosis or not. But presence of total score of 7 or more is confirmed bacterial vaginosis. So the treatment, as you know, there is anaerobic predominance. So treatment is directed towards the anaerobes. However, the care has to be taken that the antibiotic which you use should not destroy lactobacillus, which has a protective effect. So metronidazole, the lactobacillus sparing antimicrobial agent, is generally used. So this is the therapy is given for 7 days. You can use the local application of metronidazole gel or clindamycin gel from 5 to 7 days, and that has to be applied once daily at the bedtime. So this is a treatment of bacterial vaginosis. Now, second syndrome is vulvovaginal candidiasis or VVC. So before we go into the detail of vulvovaginal candidiasis, just to um, introduce you that probably you have the basic introduction lecture on the fungal pathogens. So you have the filamentous fungi and you have the yeast. Yeast are nothing but the rounded fungi which do not have the septate hyphae. So Candida is one of the prominent yeast genus, and the Candida species are the ones which are responsible for this particular syndrome, as the name suggests, vulvovaginal candidiasis. So that means involvement of vulva and vagina leading to this particular condition. The important point to note here is Candida is the normal part of healthy vaginal flora, right? And it is present in almost 25% of the healthy women of childbearing age. So this Candida is coming from endogenous origin. If you compare it with the rest of the STIs or the causes of vaginal discharge, most of the pathogens are coming from outside, sexually transmitted. However, first vulvovaginal candidiasis essentially is not solely STI. So it can happen in the normal healthy female, right? Second is the Candida species, which is causing this particular condition, is endogenous in origin, coming from the female's own body, right? So what are the various predisposing factors or the risk factors which can increase the colonization load and inflammation of the vaginal mucosa? These mainly include the reproductive hormones, where they are associated with premenstrual periods. And then the pregnancy also, the immunity is going to decrease. And the oral contraceptives again, which are going to disturb the hormonal level. So as the hormones which are having protective effect, the levels changes. So it can increase the predisposition towards increased Candida colonization of vaginal mucosa. Apart from it, use of antibiotic, that means the antibiotics are going to kill the normal bacterial vaginal flora. So yeast or the Candida which have no effect of the antibiotic are uninhibitedly growing, so they can increase. Mainly the uncontrolled diabetes and immune suppression. So these are the main risk factors which can lead to the vulvovaginal candidiasis. It's going off. Okay. So vulvovaginal candidiasis mainly caused by the Candida albicans, which is the most common species causing the vulvovaginal candidiasis, and it is being implicated in more than 85% of cases. This is followed by Candida glabrata, the other Candida species, which is responsible for the rest of the vulvovaginal candidiasis. Candida krusei and tropicalis, these are the two other Candida species which have been implicated as a cause of vulvovaginal candidiasis, but they are very, very rare. So diagnosis depends on demonstration of Candida in vaginal secretions of symptomatic women. So here the message again is, because it is normally present in the vaginal flora, so the first prerequisite is the patient or the woman must have the symptoms, typical symptoms. So there has to be typical genital symptoms and sign or vulvitis, the inflammation of vulva, along with some kind of vaginal fluid leukocytosis, which is not commonly seen. So if you see the vaginal discharge from trichomoniasis, which are we are going to discuss, or we have just finished with the other condition. Both have the uh, polymorphs which are being present. The bacterial vaginosis, the polymorphs may be present, but here the absence of polymorphs is the main feature, along with the external gelatin symptoms, which are mainly the irritation and pruritus. Okay, so this is just to show you the example of vulvovaginal candidiasis, where the discharge you see is clumped vaginal exudate, and there is lot of erythema in vulvovaginal region. You know, so that is mainly because of the allergic response to the candida antigens. So there is strong allergic reaction which is leading to severe erythema of the vaginal mucosa. And this is the balanitis. So on the male counterpart, what you see is the red spots which is there on the glands. So this is again uh, because of the candida which is being there in a female partner. So the partners who have the vulvovaginal candidiasis, the male partners, can also have a clinical condition known as balanitis. So how to proceed with the lab diagnosis? So again, in females, you have to collect the vaginal swab, which needs to have the vaginal secretions or the lesions from the vulvas, or the red erythematous areas where you can have the swab uh, for the vaginal secretions, or you can even collect the pooled vaginal discharge from the posterior fornix in a sterile container. So by the speculum examination, it can easily be collected around. In males, the swab is generally taken from the subpercutial area, and sometimes urethral swab are also helpful, but mainly it is the percutial area from where you have the swab. So you take the swab, put that into the sterile bottle containing some sterile saline, and you can transport it to the laboratory. And if there is a delay, you can keep that into the refrigerator. So what you do in laboratory first is a wet mount. So on wet mount, what you see is the rounded oval budding yeast cells along with the presence of the hyphae. So this is a picture which is showing on the right, which you have the pseudo hyphae because they do not have any septa, and actually there is a parent yeast from where they are originating, right? Alternatively, what you can do is the gram staining. On gram staining, what you see is you see the pinkish epithelial cells, then you have the gram positive bacilli, which are part of the normal vaginal flora, and then you have the thick blue hyphae, which is a violet hyphae, which is seen, which is nothing but the candida pseudohyphae. So this is what you see on the microscopy. So you can do the microscopy and you can do the culture. Culture is generally done for the speciation and the susceptibility testing. So for fungal identification and susceptibility testing, you culture it on the Seborrhoeic dextrose agar with antibiotic because it is not a sterile site. So there will be a lot of other bacterial species which is there on the swab. So you do not want them to overgrow the candida. So antibiotic containing Seborrhoeic dextrose agar is the thing which is used. And then of course, as you do with the other uh, yeast identification algorithm, you can do the germ tube test. The germ tube test in which you have the human serum in which you inoculate um, the yeast cells which are grown, and then you keep it in incubator for 2 hours, and then you see the presence of elongated tube which is coming from the yeast cell. You can also see the chlamydophores and the blastospores on the cornmeal agar through the slide culture which can be seen. And then there are chromogenic medium which is available in which different species are going to give you the different colors. So this is just a table to just to give you indication. So it's not that each species is going to give the different color. So there will be common group of species which are going to give you different colors. So Candida albicans is going to give you the green color which is seen, and the same color is being given by Candida dubliensis, and both are responsible for germ tube formation as well. So it is difficult to differentiate in routine laboratory the two. So this is how it goes. So another example is pink color colonies which are seen on chromogenic media. So it is the Candida fumata or Guillermondi or Kaifer. So there are many other species which are going to give you the uh, pink colors. But the main important advantage here is you come to know how many different species of yeast are there in a particular sample, because they will give different colors. And the pathogenic yeast, generally the Candida krusei and the Candida albicans, they are having the distinct color which you can see around. So you can see the colony and find that there is an indicative kind of, so in which direction you want to move for the further identification of Candida. So that is important and can be seen. If you remember the last lecture where we said that for STIs, specifically gonorrhea, Neisseria gonorrhoeae, and the non-gonococcal urethritis, the Chlamydia pneumoniae and the Mycoplasma, uh, uh, Chlamydia trachomatis and Mycoplasma, the nucleic acid amplification tests are the gold standard. But here it is not so. Here it is not so, because we know that the Candida is part of normal flora. So the presence of the positive NAT does not always means that the patient is having vulvovaginal candidiasis. And similarly, serology also doesn't have any role to play in diagnosis of vulvovaginal candidiasis. So how to treat it? The uncomplicated vulvovaginal candidiasis can be treated with single dose of oral fluconazole, which is a preferred treatment. You can use the intravaginal pessaries with any of the imidazole like we have the ketoconazole and cotrimazole pessaries which are available. So it has to be used at bedtime once daily for 3 to 7 days. And if there is a very severe form of vulvovaginal candidiasis, patient presenting very late, or having a recurrent kind of infection where it is failing again and again due to various reasons, mainly it is seen with the diabetic patients, the recurrent infections. So there you have to give prophylactic antifungal therapy or prolonged antifungal therapy. So fluconazole, which usually is given as a single dose, is given twice daily, 3 days apart. So total of 4 tablets has to be given. And if you are using the local intravaginal pessary, then the time has to be doubled to 2 weeks. So it was there for 1 week, it is now 2 weeks. And very importantly, the cause of this particular vulvovaginal candidiasis, specifically the hyperglycemia in diabetes, the sugar control is very important. And this needs to be remembered that vulvovaginal candidiasis is not typical STI, right? So it can be there without having a sexually transmitted disease. Third is trichomoniasis caused by Trichomonas vaginalis. So Trichomonas vaginalis was first identified in female genital secretions in 1836, and this is the protozoan. So first syndrome caused by bacteria, second is being caused by fungi, and third is being caused by protozoa. So this is one of the largest protozoan genome which is known, and which codes for almost 60,000 proteins. So Trichomonas vaginalis is STI in most of the cases, right? In most of the cases. So where it is transmitted through the sexual activity. However, it can be transmitted from the infected mother to the baby during the infant delivery and can cause neonatal pneumonia. And it can also be transmitted through contaminated towels and sharing of the underwears. Although infection in the third case is very unlikely. So this is just to give you how Trichomonas looks like. You see there are 4 flagella there. There is 5th flagella also, which is behind and very difficult to see. Then there is a nucleus, and then you have this, which is wavy thing, which is nothing but the undulating membrane. So this is hallmark of the Trichomonas. So it is generally a pear shape of size, which is very well defined, and it doesn't have a cyst. If you see the various pathogens in the particular group, they have a cystic form. So it doesn't have the cyst, but it has a pseudocyst kind of thing, which is non-motile, and it doesn't have the cystic wall, and it is rounded in shape in contrast to the trophozoite form, which is pear shape. It has a typical jerky rapid movement. So if you are making a wet mount, you can see and you can identify Trichomonas by seeing the particular characteristic motility, right? Then of course it is there in usual location is in the vagina, and in male urethra also it can be seen. So both sexes are affected, and again it presents with the pruritus vulvae and the leukorrhea, or the presence of vaginal discharge, which is there. So the common presentation of trichomoniasis is yellowish green frothy discharge. So frothy discharge is because of the lot of gas production which is done by the parasite. And there is a severe pruritus, which is hallmark of it. Dysuria, dyspareunia, along with the punctate hemorrhages on the cervix. So it is again the second cause of the strawberry cervix. So one cause we saw in the previous lecture, this is the second cause. And if one has to say till one cause of strawberry cervix, so this is the trichomoniasis where strawberry cervix is commonly seen. So diagnosis should not be made only on the basis of clinical presentation, as we saw that strawberry cervix is there in different bacterial urethritis patients also, and it is not very commonly seen. It is just seen in less than 2% of the cases of trichomoniasis. Similarly, absence of frothy discharge does not rule out trichomoniasis, because again, it is not seen in more than 10% of the women who are infected with Trichomonas vaginalis. So symptomatic trichomoniasis is mainly associated with inflammatory response and vaginal leukocytosis. So presence of polymorphs is hallmark of this particular syndrome. As we saw in vulvovaginal candidiasis, it is typically absent, accompanied by the anaerobic bacterial overgrowth and depletion of lactobacilli, which is confusing the presentation with that of the bacterial vaginosis. Other STIs such as gonorrhea and chlamydia often are also present, because generally STIs in solo form are not that common, right? Infected men are usually asymptomatic, and it has been identified as a cause of non-gonococcal urethritis or associated with non-gonococcal urethritis in 5% of the males who are having the non-gonococcal urethritis. So this is the presentation. So if you do the pars speculum examination on the cervical os, you see the white purulent discharge along with bubbles. So here also the bubbles are there. So frothy discharge is there, which is indicative of the trichomoniasis. Although absence of froth does not rule out trichomoniasis. This is just to give you a glimpse of strawberry cervix. So what you see here is the petechiae formation, which is there all along the cervical os, and there is edema also, which is seen around. So cervical petechiae, which is also known as colpitis macularis or strawberry cervix, is a specific manifestation of trichomoniasis. So coming to the lab diagnosis in females, generally the sample is the high vaginal swab, from the posterior fornix and the lateral walls. Vaginal secretions can be taken, or the endocervical smear or secretions can also be taken. In males, urethral swab, because it may be associated with the urethritis and it is being called, urethra is the one where the trichomonas will be residing in males. And you can use the first voided urine and the centrifuged that urine for the look for the trichomonas. But when you centrifuge the urine, the trichomonas motility will be lost. So that means you have only main diagnostic which is available through the stained smears rather than the wet mount, right? Apart from it, semen and prostatic secretions may also contain the trichomonas if it is a chronic kind of disease or long-lasting disease which is being carried by a male. Okay, now the sample has come to the laboratory. So first thing, you can do the wet mount and one or more trichomonads with the characteristic morphology which we discussed along with the jerky motility. So that is a twitching motility which is there. But the only problem is that you need at least 10,000 organisms per ml of vaginal fluid to be seen it under the microscopy. So the sensitivity becomes poor. So it is a maximum 80%, but it can go down to 35% based on how the sample has been collected, transported, and who is the observer. However, once identified, the specificity is almost 100%. And you can do the stained smear to look into. So Giemsa and Papniklo smears are the one which are more common. Papniklo smear is reported to have the sensitivity slightly higher than that of the wet mount, almost double to that of it. So reaching almost 60% from 35%. And specificity is 95 to 97%. So when you see the stain slides, this is how it will look like. It's not coming again. So this is a pap smear, pap stain, sorry. The pap stain of the discharge which has been collected, and what you see is the trichomonas which are being seen here as the arrows which are there, right? And then this is gram stain. I have wrongly copy pasted it. I think gram stain doesn't look like this. This is again the pap smear which has come. So this is the Giemsa staining of the Trichomonas vaginalis. Again, it is the same picture is coming up due to some again issues. So the main thing is it is a deep purple color with dark deep blue nuclei which is seen on the Giemsa staining. Sometimes you are able to see the undulating membrane also here. So another thing after microscopy, so wet mount, stain smear, and you can have the cultures. So culture is the gold standard for diagnosis of trichomoniasis. Sample is generally the urethral swab with first voided urine sediment in a single culture, right? Culture medium, when we talk of, there are a lot of media which are available. Diamond Trichomonas medium is the one which is gold standard and is the one which is commonly used. So interpretation mainly is that when you grow it, you look for the turbidity in the medium, and if you see the turbidity, you take material, look for the motile trichomonas. You can perform Gram stain to look for the characteristic morphology of the trichomonas vagina. Another interesting way to culture trichomonas is TV pouch culture. TV is nothing but the Trichomonas vaginalis pouch culture. So this is a schematic diagram here. Here it is just showing that it is a double pouch type of system which is there. So there is a top pouch and there is a bottom pouch which is there. So the sample is inoculated into the top pouch. So there is a fluid in the top pouch, and then you push that swab into the bottom pouch so that it is inoculated for culture there. So top pouch is being used periodically for the periodically for the microscopy, and bottom pouch will be used for the ultimate culture of the Trichomonas vaginalis. So this is just to show you, this is actually how it looks like. So the swab is being transported and pushed into this particular TV pouch and inoculated, and then it is being, again, there is a problem, I think. The same picture is coming. So once this is done, so it is being put into a plastic cassette, which can be then stored easily, and it can hang around into the stand in which these pouches are being kept. So then nucleic acid amplification test, or the PCRs, we can do. They are also very, very useful in diagnosing the trichomonas, and more so when the patient is asymptomatic or early phase of infection. So it can be applied to the self-collected non-invasive specimens such as vaginal swab or the first void urine sample. There are rapid point of care tests are also available, where you can use DNA probes, that is oligonucleotide probes, which can simultaneously detect Candida, Gardnerella vaginalis, and Trichomonas vaginalis. Because if the patient is coming to you with abnormal discharge, it is difficult just looking at it or having a clinical presentation that it is either of the three. Although it may indicate on one side that it is either of the three, but we need to confirm it to the lab test, and the treatment is also different for the three. So that is why the diagnosis becomes important. So antigen detection test you can do. So there are immunochromatographic, capillary flow, dipstick, all three kind of technologies are available for point of care test, which can be used. So the treatment for trichomoniasis is single dose 2 gram metronidazole. So metronidazole, if you see commercially, is available in 500 milligram tablet. So that means 4 tablets stacked has to be given as a single dose. Tinidazole is more effective than metronidazole and generally is being used as a single dose in men where it is more difficult to treat, or patients having the complicated or delayed or recurrent trichomoniasis, there tinidazole is also used. Intravaginal therapy with parmomycin and furazolidone may also be as we have discussed, vulvar itching and irritation. Right? In trichomoniasis, it is the purulent discharge and malodor. Sometimes pruritus is also there. It is vaginosis, whereas in case of vulvovaginal candidiasis, it is normal. Amine test is positive for trichomoniasis and bacterial vaginosis, whereas for vulvovaginal candidiasis, it is negative. So, amine test there is one connect question which is there asking for culture or broth. So probably this question was asked regarding the trichomonas um, culture, which we have discussed. So generally it is a liquid medium which is there so that it can promote the growth of trichomonas and you can demonstrate the presence of trophozoite in the cultures. So it is more of a liquid culture or a broth which is there. Any more questions?